thought it was just another flight, another day, another gate, another smiling passenger boarding with stories and destinations she'd never know. But in less than 3 minutes, that ordinary moment would turn into something far darker. Because when two young black women, identical twins, calm, polished, carrying nothing but confidence and a designer bag, walked toward that gate, the air around them changed. What began as a quiet murmur became suspicion. What looked like professionalism became prejudice. And before anyone could understand what was really happening, the line between security and discrimination vanished, replaced by handcuffs, flashing lights, and a truth that couldn't be undone. This isn't just a story about an airport. It's about what happens when skin color becomes a threat, when assumptions become weapons, and when justice, for once, chooses to stand on the right side of the badge. Stay with me until the end, because by the time you hear how the story ends, you'll never look at an airport gate the same way again. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, stay with me. Like, comment, and share, because silence has never changed anything. The scene opens with chaos, flashing lights bouncing off glass walls, echoes of shouting cutting through the sterile calm of an airport terminal. A pair of silver handcuffs glint under the harsh fluorescent light as a woman in a red blazer, a gate agent, stands frozen, disbelief plastered across her face. Moments ago, she was the one calling security. Now, she's the one surrounded by them. Passengers have stopped moving, clutching their luggage mid-step, eyes wide as whispers ripple across the terminal. A voice over the intercom calmly announces the next boarding group, as if the world hasn't just flipped upside down right here at Gate 47. And just beyond the crowd, two young black women, twins, barely in their 20s, stand side by side, shaken but composed, tears glistening in their eyes as they clutch each other's hands. Moments earlier, they were being accused. Now, they're the reason justice is being served. But to understand how everything turned so fast, how a simple flight check-in spiraled into public humiliation, racial profiling, and a national headline, you have to rewind. Just 3 minutes earlier, no one saw it coming. Not the passengers, not the security guards, not even the agent herself. It began with something so small, so ordinary, that most people wouldn't have even noticed. Two young women, tall, elegant, dressed in soft neutral tones that spoke of quiet confidence, walked toward the gate. They moved with a kind of grace that drew attention, not for arrogance, but for presence. Matching carry-ons, matching calm smiles, matching purpose. And between them, slung over one shoulder, was a rare designer bag, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Heads turned, eyes lingered, and then something shifted. The gate agent's expression tightened. Her smile faded into suspicion. Her posture stiffened, as if instinct, or something she mistook for it, told her that something wasn't right. Maybe it was the bag. Maybe it was the quiet confidence. Or maybe it was something far uglier. Something that had nothing to do with luggage, and everything to do with what she thought people who looked like that could afford. She stepped forward, clipboard in hand, voice sharp enough to draw attention. The twins stopped, uncertain, polite. But politeness doesn't protect you when prejudice decides you're a threat. One question led to another. Then came the demand. Proof of purchase, verification, ownership. It wasn't about airline policy. It wasn't about safety. It was about assumption, and the arrogance of someone who believed her suspicion carried more truth than another person's dignity. Passengers watched. Some frowned. Some looked away. And somewhere among the crowd, a man had stopped walking, tall, composed, a quiet intensity in his eyes. He wasn't supposed to be there that day. His flight had been delayed. His seat changed at the last minute. But fate has a way of seating the right witness in the right row. In just a few breaths, the tension thickened. Security was called. The twins were surrounded. The crowd murmured. The agent crossed her arms, smug in her certainty. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the man standing a few steps away wasn't just another traveler. He was federal law enforcement. And in less than 3 minutes, the badge on his belt would change everything. The sound of those handcuffs, cold, metallic, final, would echo longer than any announcement that day. Because sometimes, Justice doesn't arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes it walks right up to the gate, before the flashing lights, before the handcuffs, before the crowd turned silent. There were just two sisters, wide-eyed and full of excitement. For them, this trip wasn't luxury or leisure. It was legacy. Their names were Maya and Naomi Carter, 21 years old, identical twins from Atlanta, raised by parents who had worked themselves to the bone to make sure their daughters never had to question their worth. Their father, a respected attorney, and their mother, a former teacher turned entrepreneur, had instilled in them one rule that carried through every achievement, every milestone, every step they took in life. Walk with your head high, even when the world tries to bow it for you. That morning, the twins were headed to Los Angeles for a global fashion showcase, a place they'd dreamed of since they started their small luxury bag brand 3 years ago. What began as a side project in their mother's kitchen had turned into something extraordinary. Their designs had caught the attention of influencers, celebrities, and investors. They were flying out to meet with their biggest potential partner yet, a moment that could change their future forever. They'd saved every penny to make it here, not for tickets, but for the dream that came after landing. Every detail was intentional, every decision careful. They'd even chosen their travel outfits with pride. Soft beige sweaters, simple gold jewelry, clean sneakers. Nothing flashy, just effortless grace. And then there was the bag, their pride and joy. A $40,000, one-of-a-kind prototype they'd made by hand. It was the centerpiece of their upcoming pitch, a symbol of everything they'd built together. To anyone else, it was just a luxury accessory. But to them, it was a promise that two young black women could create something the world hadn't yet learned to expect from them. As they rolled their luggage through the polished marble floor of the airport, they felt calm, ready. The morning sunlight filtered through the high glass windows, painting soft reflections across the terminal floor. Announcements echoed overhead. Families laughed, business travelers hurried, and life unfolded as usual. They checked in easily, passed through security without trouble, and made their way toward their gate with coffees in hand, chatting softly about their upcoming presentation. There was nervous energy in their smiles, the kind that comes only before a life-changing opportunity. They reached gate 47 early, just the way Maya liked it. She was always the meticulous one, the planner, the detail keeper. Naomi was the dreamer, the one who believed that life had a way of rewarding faith. Together, they balanced each other, structure and spirit, logic and light. As they settled into the waiting area, Naomi pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos of their brand's newest prototypes. "We made it," she whispered to herself, a smile tugging at her lips. She didn't mean the airport. She meant everything that led to it. The sleepless nights, the rejections, the small wins that didn't feel small anymore. A few seats away, the gate agent stood behind her counter, tapping keys, scanning tickets. She looked bored, until her gaze caught on something that made her pause. It was the bag, a deep emerald green, hand-stitched, elegant, and unmistakably expensive. The kind of bag usually carried by old wealth or famous faces, not two young black women dressed like college students. Her brow furrowed slightly, her head tilted, and in that quiet, almost imperceptible moment, a seed of suspicion began to grow. Naomi noticed it. The look, that flicker of judgment she'd seen too many times to count. A quick, assessing glance that stripped away individuality and replaced it with stereotype. She nudged Maya, murmuring that maybe they should move closer to the boarding line. But Maya, calm as ever, just smiled. "It's fine," she said. "We belong here." Still, the unease lingered. As the minutes passed, passengers began lining up. The twins waited patiently for their group to be called. The agent continued scanning, her eyes darting back to them occasionally. Curious, cautious, almost calculating. When the twins finally approached the counter, Maya offered her boarding pass with a polite smile. "Good morning." The agent's tone was clipped, professional but cold. Her eyes darted down to the bag again, then back up to Maya's face. "Can I see that?" Maya blinked, confused. "See what?" "The bag," the agent replied, her hand gesturing toward it. "That's an exclusive designer model. We've had incidents of counterfeits before. I need to verify it's authentic before you board." The words hit like a slap. Passengers nearby turned their heads. The warmth in the room dropped a few degrees. Maya's lips parted, disbelief softening her voice. "It's not counterfeit. It's mine." But the agent didn't seem to hear her. Or maybe she didn't care. Her voice grew sharper. "I'll need proof of purchase or identification of ownership." A few people shifted uncomfortably in line. Others pretended not to notice. Naomi's jaw tightened. Maya still tried to keep her composure, opened her phone, and pulled up an email with their brand's verification certificate. She held it out, but the agent's tone was now fully condescending. "You expect me to believe you made that?" The words hung in the air like poison. A small chuckle came from someone nearby. Another passenger looked away, shaking their head, not in disbelief of the twins, but of the audacity of what they were witnessing. Yet no one spoke. No one intervened. Naomi's chest rose with restrained anger. Maya stayed calm, though her hands trembled slightly as she placed the bag gently on the counter. "You can check it," she said softly. But the agent didn't check it. She called for security. The sound of her radio echoed louder than it should have, as if the very air in the terminal was listening. Two uniformed airport officers began walking toward the gate, their vests reflecting under the lights. The crowd's attention shifted completely now. Phones were raised subtly. Whispers began. Maya and Naomi stood frozen. Humiliation crept up their throats like fire. It wasn't about the bag anymore. It was about their existence being questioned in real time, their dignity, their worth, reduced to suspicion. And yet, amid the rising panic, a stillness began to form, a quiet presence watching from nearby. A tall man in his 40s, seated just a few rows away, put down his coffee cup. His eyes narrowed, not in surprise, but in recognition. He had seen this scene play out before, too many times, in too many places. He stood slowly, his posture steady but alert, the kind of composure that came from years of authority. His name was Special Agent Jordan Reeves. 20 years with the FBI, trained to read people, trained to detect lies, and what he saw unfolding at Gate 47 wasn't a security risk. It was a power play built on prejudice. He took a step forward, his mind calculating every detail. The tone of the agent's voice, the tension in the sister's posture, the crowd's growing silence. He didn't show his badge yet. Not yet. The agent's radio crackled again. "Officers inbound," a voice confirmed. She smiled, not a kind smile, but one of smug validation, like her accusation had already been proven true. Maya exhaled shakily. Naomi's hand found hers, fingers interlocking, silent strength flowing between them. And as the sound of approaching boots grew louder, Jordan Reeves' jaw set. He wasn't supposed to be on this flight, but maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he needed to be. Because some moments aren't accidents. They're reckonings waiting to happen. And in just a few breaths, Gate 47 was about to become one. The security officers arrived fast, too fast, as if they'd been waiting for something to go wrong. Two of them, both middle-aged men in dark uniforms with patches reading airport police, approached the counter with the mechanical confidence of authority. The gate area fell silent. The sound of rolling suitcases stopped. Every nearby passenger became a quiet spectator to a scene that should have never happened. Maya stood tall, though her hands trembled slightly against her sweater. Naomi, beside her, felt her pulse pounding in her ears. They could feel the eyes, dozens of them, watching, judging, recording. The gate agent gestured toward them, her voice pitched with false calm. "These two passengers are attempting to board with what I believe is a stolen designer bag. I requested proof of ownership, but they refused to comply." Naomi's voice cracked with disbelief. "That's a lie. We showed her proof." She just... "Ma'am," one of the officers interrupted sharply. "We'll take it from here." The taller officer stepped closer. "We just need to verify your identification and examine the bag." Maya inhaled deeply. She'd been taught to stay calm, to de-escalate. But this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was an accusation wearing a polite tone. "This bag isn't stolen. Maya said carefully. My sister and I made it. We're the designers. The shorter officer raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk flickering across his face. You made it. His voice carried the same disbelief as the gate agent's, laced with quiet mockery. And what brand would that be? Naomi's voice rose. Carter Atelier. You can look it up right now. But the man didn't move. He just looked at his partner. You ever heard of that? The other officer shook his head. Nope. Naomi stepped forward slightly. Because you don't want to. That line hung in the air like electricity. A few passengers murmured. Someone whispered. They didn't do anything. But still no one intervened. The gate agent folded her arms, her expression now one of smug victory. Ladies, either provide documentation or step aside. You're holding up the boarding process. Jordan Reeves, sitting 2 rows back, had seen enough. He stood slow, deliberate, and began walking toward the counter. His stride was calm, but the authority in his movement drew subtle attention. His eyes were sharp, scanning, cataloging everything. Posture, tone, bias. Years of experience told him this wasn't about protocol. It was about perception, who looked out of place in a luxury space. By the time he reached the counter, one officer was holding out his hand toward Maya. Ma'am, we'll need you to hand over the bag. Her knuckles whitened as she clutched it closer. This is my work, she said, her voice trembling but steady. You don't get to take that. The taller officer's tone hardened. If you refuse, we'll have to detain you for questioning. Naomi stepped between them instinctively. You're not detaining anyone. And that's when Jordan's voice cut through the tension. Deep, calm, commanding. Is there a problem here? All heads turned. The shorter officer's eyes narrowed. Sir, this is a security matter. Please return to your seat. Jordan's gaze didn't waver. A security matter? He tilted his head slightly. Because 2 young women with a handmade bag make you nervous? Sir, no, let's be clear. Jordan interrupted, stepping closer. I've been watching since the beginning. There's no theft, no disturbance, no violation of protocol. The only thing happening here is bias being dressed up as procedure. The gate agent's face stiffened. Who are you? Jordan reached into his jacket slowly, revealing a leather badge wallet. He flipped it open with practiced precision. Special Agent Jordan Reeves, FBI. The silence that followed was absolute. The officers froze. The gate agent's smugness evaporated instantly. The weight of those 4 letters, FBI, changed everything. Jordan's voice remained calm, but each word cut cleanly. Now, unless there's an actual report of theft or a verified reason to detain these passengers, I'd suggest you step back and let them board. The taller officer's throat bobbed as he swallowed. We were just following protocol. No, Jordan said evenly. You were following prejudice. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder now, a low rumble of realization spreading through the passengers. Phones were recording openly. The truth was no longer invisible. The gate agent stammered. I was only trying to prevent a security issue. Jordan turned to her. Do you ask every passenger carrying designer goods for proof of ownership? She didn't answer. He took a step closer, lowering his tone just enough for it to feel like a warning. Because if not, that's selective enforcement. And you might want to consider how that looks, especially now that it's being filmed. The woman's face drained of color. Behind them, Naomi exhaled shakily. Maya blinked back tears she didn't want anyone to see. Jordan turned toward them, his expression softening instantly. You two okay? Maya nodded weakly. Yeah, I think so. Good, he said, because you've got a flight to catch. He looked back at the officers, who were now visibly uneasy. These women are free to board. I'll personally ensure they're not harassed further. Is that clear? Both officers muttered quiet affirmations. The gate agent hesitated, then finally lowered her eyes to the scanner and scanned their boarding passes with trembling hands. Enjoy your flight, she said quietly. Naomi took the passes, her voice shaking with contained fury. We will. As they walked down the jet bridge, Maya's hand still clutched the bag tight against her chest. Every step felt heavy, like the air itself carried the weight of what had just happened. They found their seats near the middle of the plane. The passengers around them, who had seen the scene unfold, offered small smiles or nods of solidarity, but it didn't erase the sting. Naomi turned to her sister once they'd buckled in. "I can't believe that just happened." Maya stared out the window. "No," she whispered, "I can." She'd seen versions of it before, in stores, at airports, in boardrooms. Always the same story, wearing a different uniform. When the seatbelt sign clicked off, Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking as she opened the camera app. "I need to say something about this," she muttered. "People need to see it." But Maya placed a hand on hers. "Not yet," she said quietly. "Not until we land. I don't want this to be another angry clip online. It needs to mean something." Naomi nodded reluctantly. She understood. Across the aisle, Jordan Reeves was seated a few rows away. He hadn't stopped watching, not out of suspicion, but protection. He'd seen how these things could turn. One wrong word, one wrong movement, and dignity could be rewritten into guilt. He looked down at his badge for a moment, a symbol that was supposed to represent justice. But lately, it felt like a shield against the very system he was part of. He thought of his own wife, a flight attendant for nearly a decade. She told him stories, subtle humiliations, snide remarks, the way some passengers would refuse to make eye contact. But she always said the same thing. It's not about one incident. It's about what they think you are before they know who you are. And now, here he was, watching that truth unfold again. As the plane ascended, the tension slowly thinned, replaced by a fragile quiet. The sky outside turned from gray to gold as the plane pierced through the clouds. But even up here, above the noise, the weight of injustice followed them. Maya finally spoke. "Why do we always have to prove we belong? Every room, every line, every gate. It's like we're guilty first." Naomi's jaw tightened. "Then maybe it's time we stop asking for permission." Her words hit with quiet conviction. And that was the moment Maya decided they wouldn't stay silent. Not this time. Hours later, when the plane landed in Los Angeles, the sisters waited for the aisle to clear. As they stood to retrieve their bags, a soft voice behind them spoke. "You handled yourself with grace," Jordan said, standing in the aisle, his tone gentle. Maya turned. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I've seen a lot of things in my job," he continued. "But what happened back there?" He shook his head. "That's not about policy. That's about perception, and it needs to be seen for what it is." Naomi looked at him curiously. "Why did you step in?" He smiled faintly. "Because I've got a wife who wears those same shoes, and I promised her once that if I ever saw what she described happening to someone else, I wouldn't stay quiet." The sisters exchanged a look, gratitude mixed with disbelief that anyone had chosen to stand with them. Jordan handed them a business card. "If you need to file a formal complaint, I can make sure it's handled properly. But whatever you do next, don't let them make you small. You already changed the room." They thanked him, and as they walked off the plane into the bright California sunlight, something inside both sisters had shifted. The humiliation still burned, but underneath it, a resolve was taking root. Naomi turned to Maya as they stepped into the terminal. "You know we're posting about this, right?" Maya nodded slowly. "Yes, but not just for us." That night, in their hotel room, they recorded a video, not of anger, but of truth. They spoke calmly, deliberately, describing what had happened, the assumptions made, the way dignity had been treated like contraband. Naomi held up the bag, their creation, and said softly, "We built this, with our hands, and still, the world looked at us and saw theft." Within hours, the clip went viral. Millions of views, hashtags trending, news outlets picking it up. The airport issued a statement by morning, calling it a misunderstanding. But the sisters knew better. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a mirror. And as the world reacted, the gate agent's name began trending, The airline scrambled to contain the backlash, and think pieces flooded social media about systemic bias in everyday spaces. But for Maya and Naomi, the moment that stayed with them wasn't the outrage or the attention. It was that brief, still silence, standing at gate 47, facing down the weight of centuries in the form of one gate agent suspicion, and the memory of a man calm, unwavering, standing between them and a system that had already decided who they were. The morning after the flight, sunlight poured into the hotel suite, warm, golden, and blindingly normal. But nothing felt normal. Maya sat by the window, coffee untouched, phone in hand. Scrolling through a storm, she didn't know how to stop. The video they'd uploaded 12 hours ago had exploded across the internet. Over 6 million views. Tens of thousands of comments. Some furious, others compassionate, and far too many hateful. Naomi, sitting on the edge of her bed, read out a few headlines aloud, her voice shaking. Designer sisters accuse airline of racial profiling. Airport bias video sparks national debate. And then, the one that made her stop mid-sentence. FBI agent confronts airport police in viral racism clip. She looked up sharply. They're talking about him. Maya frowned. Jordan. Naomi nodded. They're calling him a hero. People want interviews. There's already footage of him flashing his badge. Maya's chest tightened. He didn't do it for that. No, Naomi said quietly. But the world doesn't care why. They just need a symbol. There was a knock at the door. When Maya opened it, Jordan Reeves stood there, calm as ever, but visibly tired. He was dressed in civilian clothes, though a faint crease where his badge had hung still marked his belt. Morning, he said softly. Mind if I come in? Maya stepped aside. He looked around the suite, at the open laptop, playing cable news footage of the incident. He didn't need to ask. He already knew what it meant when a private moment turned public. They're running with it, he said quietly. FBI Media Relations called me this morning. Naomi stiffened. Are you in trouble? Jordan hesitated. Let's just say they don't like it when agents become part of a story. Maya crossed her arms. You did the right thing. He smiled faintly. That doesn't always mean it's the easy thing. For a moment, silence filled the room. The weight of consequence hung between them, visible, heavy, real. Then Jordan spoke again, his tone more serious. You should both know, the airline's already in damage control mode. Their statement says there was a procedural misunderstanding, not discrimination. They're framing it like it was just a communication error. Naomi laughed bitterly. A communication error that involved calling the police on us? Yeah, Jordan said. They're protecting themselves. They have to. The airport authority is launching an internal review, but don't expect much from that either. Maya stared out the window, her reflection blurring against the glass. So they get to rewrite what happened. Again, Jordan's voice softened. Not if you control the narrative first. That line struck her like a spark. Naomi leaned forward. What do you mean? Jordan sat down. You've already got the world's attention. But right now, they're reacting to a clip, not a cause. If you want this to last beyond outrage, you need to tell the full story. Who you are, what you built, what this moment means. Maya looked at her sister, and for the first time since the airport, something fierce flickered behind her eyes. They weren't just victims. They were voices. That afternoon, they filmed a new video, calm, composed, deliberate. The camera sat on a tripod, facing both sisters in front of a simple white wall. Naomi spoke first, steady but sharp. Yesterday, we were accused of theft for owning a bag we designed ourselves. Not because of evidence, because of assumption. Maya continued softly. What happened at that gate wasn't just about us. It's about every black creator, traveler, and professional who's ever been treated like they didn't belong in the spaces they earned. They didn't cry. They didn't yell. They simply told the truth. Within hours, the new video spread even faster. Celebrities reposted it. Journalists reached out. Major news networks requested interviews. And most powerfully, thousands of people shared their own stories under a new hashtag, Hashtag proving nothing. Each post carried the same message. I shouldn't have to prove I belong. The sisters' calm defiance turned into a movement overnight. But with visibility came backlash. Emails poured in, some supportive, others venomous. Threats, accusations, people digging through their social media histories for anything to discredit them. Then came the corporate side. 2 days later, Maya received a call from the airline's public relations team. The woman on the line was polite, but cold, the voice of institutional damage control. "We'd like to extend a formal apology and offer a goodwill settlement," she said. "In exchange, we'd ask that you remove the original video and refrain from further public statements." Maya's voice was steady. "You want us to be quiet." The woman hesitated. "We want to resolve this respectfully and avoid unnecessary escalation." Naomi leaned closer to the phone. "You mean avoid accountability?" There was silence on the other end, then the faint sound of forced professionalism. "I understand this has been difficult for you. We hope to move forward positively." Maya hung up. For a long moment, neither sister spoke. Then Naomi broke the silence. "They really think they can buy silence." Maya looked at her. "Not this time." 3 days later, the story took a turn no one saw coming. A video surfaced, security footage from the gate area, leaked anonymously. It showed everything. The gate agent's dismissive tone, the officer's aggressive stance, and Jordan stepping forward, flashing his badge. There was no way to spin it now. The footage matched the sister's story exactly. News outlets replayed it endlessly. The airline scrambled again, this time issuing a deeper apology and placing the gate agent on administrative leave. But the damage was done. The internet had found its villain and its heroes. Jordan Reeves became a reluctant symbol of good policing. The sisters were invited to morning shows, podcasts, and even a primetime special. Everyone wanted to talk about the lesson. But privately, it didn't feel victorious. Maya couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment the officer reached for her bag, the disbelief in his eyes when she said, "I made it." Naomi tried to stay focused, diving into work, designing new pieces for Carter Atelier's upcoming line. But every order, every message, felt heavier now. The brand was no longer just about art. It had become a statement. Then, one evening, Jordan called again. His voice sounded different, tense. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Internal Affairs reached out. They're reviewing my conduct during the incident." Maya's stomach dropped. "They're punishing you." He hesitated. "Technically, they're assessing whether my actions violated procedure. But we both know what that means." Naomi's voice sharpened. "You stepped in to stop a racist confrontation. That's their violation, not yours." "I know," Jordan said quietly, "but institutions protect themselves first. Even the Bureau." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Maya said softly, "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he replied. "If I had to do it again, I'd do the same thing." She could hear the weariness behind his voice, not regret, but the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting this fight for too long. After the call ended, Maya turned to Naomi. "We can't let him take the fall for this." Naomi's eyes burned with resolve. "Then we won't." A week later, the sisters went live again. This time, they didn't talk about themselves. They talked about him. Maya spoke with calm precision. "When the officers and gate agent decided we didn't belong, one man stood up, not because of fame or cameras, but because it was right. Now he's being investigated for it." Naomi added, "That's what accountability looks like. Punishing the person who did the right thing while protecting the ones who caused the harm." The clip went viral again. Within hours, hashtag Stand With Jordan began trending. Former agents, civil rights lawyers, and everyday people flooded social media, demanding transparency. Petitions started. News anchors questioned why justice seemed to punish itself. By the end of that week, the Bureau's review quietly ended. No disciplinary action taken. Jordan was cleared. He called them that night, his voice lighter for the first time. "You two are dangerous," he said with a laugh. Naomi smiled. "We prefer effective." He chuckled softly. "Whatever you call it, thank you." You didn't have to do that. Maya replied, You didn't have to either. That's the point. But beneath the newfound recognition, something deeper shifted inside all three of them. For Maya and Naomi, fame was never the goal. The attention, the praise, it all felt hollow compared to what they'd lost that day. The quiet dignity of existing without suspicion. And for Jordan, it became impossible to unsee how close the system had come to silencing him. Not for wrongdoing, but for decency. He visited the sisters one last time before returning to D.C. They met at a small cafe, away from cameras, just three people who'd crossed paths at the edge of injustice. Maya looked at him thoughtfully. Do you ever get used to it? He shook his head. No, you just get better at carrying it. Naomi sipped her coffee, her voice soft but sure. Then maybe that's the point, not to get used to it. Jordan nodded slowly. Maybe. Outside, life went on. Planes taking off, people rushing to catch flights, security lines forming. Somewhere, another gate agent checked another passenger's bag. Somewhere else, another woman felt the familiar sting of suspicion. The world didn't change overnight, but something had shifted. A spark in the noise. A small act of defiance that refused to fade. And for the first time, Maya believed that maybe that was enough for now. Because change didn't always start with power. Sometimes it started with refusal. Refusal to shrink. Refusal to stay silent. Refusal to let them decide the story. And once that refusal began, it couldn't be stopped. Weeks passed, but the echo of that moment at the airport never really faded. It became something bigger, something none of them could control, yet none of them wanted to stop. The story of the twins, the gate agent, and the FBI agent had turned into a cultural lightning bolt. It wasn't just about one confrontation anymore. It became a mirror, one that forced an entire country to see what it had been avoiding. Talk shows debated it. Airlines released new sensitivity statements. Influencers, activists, and politicians used it as fuel for their own narratives. But in the middle of all that noise, Maya and Naomi Carter were trying to breathe again. Their studio, once a quiet space for creativity, now buzzed with interviews, packages, press calls, and brand offers. Everyone wanted a piece of the moment. Magazine covers, talk show invites, collaborations with major designers. It should have felt like success. But Maya couldn't shake the unease. One afternoon, as camera crews packed up after another interview, she sat in the corner of their workspace, staring at the sketches pinned to the wall. Dresses, handbags, the beginnings of their new line, elegant, minimalist, bold. Naomi walked in holding a tablet full of emails. Guess what? CNN wants us for their evening feature. Maya didn't look up. Do they want us? Or do they want the sisters who got profiled? Naomi's voice softened. Does it matter? The message is still out there. It matters to me, Maya whispered. I don't want our pain to become a brand. For a long moment, Naomi said nothing. Then she sighed and sat beside her sister. I get it. I feel it too. But we didn't choose this. It chose us. And now we decide what to do with it. Maya looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion behind her determined eyes. Naomi had been holding everything together, pushing forward while Maya hesitated. Maybe that's what strength looked like. Not the absence of fear, but moving anyway. She nodded slowly. Then let's do something real with it. Naomi's brows lifted. Like what? Maya turned toward the sketches again, voice quiet but sure. Let's use what we have, our platform, our designs, our story, to give others the space we didn't have that day. Naomi tilted her head. You mean? I mean we start something, Maya said. A foundation. For travelers, creators, students, anyone who's been treated like they don't belong. We call it something that reminds them of their worth. Naomi smiled faintly. How about the Belong Project? Maya smiled back. Perfect. 2 months later, the Belong Project officially launched. It wasn't flashy, no celebrity gala, no overproduced announcement. Just a quiet press release, a short video, and a promise to advocate for dignity and inclusion in public spaces. Within days, donations poured in. Partnerships formed with travel groups, diversity organizations, and community initiatives. They built programs that provided legal aid to victims of discrimination, training sessions for airport staff, and scholarships for young designers from marginalized backgrounds. And in the middle of all that growth, Maya and Naomi found purpose again. They were no longer reacting. They were creating. But not everything healed cleanly. The airline that started it all was now under federal review. The gate agent, the woman whose accusation had set everything in motion, was facing disciplinary hearings and civil lawsuits. Maya sometimes wondered what she felt now. Remorse, embarrassment, or denial. She would never know. But she also knew that wasn't her responsibility. Some stories didn't need closure. Some wounds healed by moving forward, not by revisiting the cause. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Jordan Reeves sat in his modest office at the Bureau, staring at the stack of files on his desk. After the internal review, life had technically returned to normal. But he hadn't. Every time he walked through the corridors of the agency, past rows of agents, past the chatter and the quiet authority of power, he thought about that day at the gate. How easily injustice could disguise itself as procedure. How silence could masquerade as neutrality. And how one small act of defiance could ripple further than he ever imagined. He wasn't suspended. He wasn't reprimanded. But something inside him had changed, something permanent. He began requesting new assignments, specifically cases involving civil rights violations, hate crimes, and misconduct. He spent weekends volunteering with mentorship programs for young black men and women entering law enforcement. He told his story only once, privately, to a new recruit who'd asked what it meant to serve justice in a world that sometimes ignored it. Jordan had paused, then answered simply, "It means remembering that the badge doesn't make you the law. It reminds you who it's supposed to protect." As winter turned to spring, the sisters invited Jordan to speak at their first official Belong Project event, a small forum hosted in Atlanta, with travelers, activists, and journalists attending. He hesitated at first, but finally agreed. When he took the stage, he looked out over the crowd, a sea of faces, all carrying the quiet determination of people who had seen too much but still chose hope. He didn't speak like an agent. He spoke like a man who had witnessed something break, and then watched it rebuild itself differently. He said, "I didn't step forward that day because I was an agent. I stepped forward because I was a man watching two young women being treated as suspects instead of citizens. That moment reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That silence is also a decision. And neutrality in the face of injustice isn't neutrality at all." When he finished, the room was silent for a full 10 seconds, not out of confusion, but reverence. Then the applause began. Maya and Naomi stood at the side of the stage, tears in their eyes. They had fought through humiliation, fear, and anger, and somehow, here they were. Not broken, not bitter, just awake. Months later, life found a new rhythm. The Carter Atelier brand was thriving again, but this time, it wasn't defined by a viral incident. It was defined by purpose. Each collection carried subtle messages of resilience, embroidered words like belong, rise, seen woven into linings and tags. Every stitch became a quiet protest, every bag a story of defiance. The Belong Project continued to grow, expanding into schools and airports nationwide. Their initiatives began shaping new anti-bias protocols for airlines and public service agencies. The story that began with humiliation had become the blueprint for change. One night, after a long day of filming a documentary about their journey, the sisters sat on their apartment balcony. The city glowed below, distant and alive. Naomi leaned her head on Maya's shoulder. "Do you ever think about her?" Maya didn't need to ask who. "Sometimes," she said, "but less than before." Naomi nodded. "Me too." They sat in silence, letting the night speak for them. Then Maya whispered, "Do you think what we did actually changed anything?" Naomi smiled softly. "Maybe not everything, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe we're just a reminder that the world can't keep pretending not to see." The wind picked up, warm and gentle. Somewhere in the distance, a plane ascended, lights glinting like stars against the dark. Maya watched it disappear into the night sky and felt something inside her loosen. The ache, the anger, the need to explain. They didn't owe the world an apology for existing. For the first time in a long time, she believed that fully. Back in D.C., Jordan closed his office door and sat in silence for a while. The city hummed outside his window, but he was somewhere else, replaying that moment at the gate again. He thought about Maya's defiance, Naomi's calm fire, the way fear had turned into movement. He realized that maybe the world didn't change with laws or investigations first. Maybe it changed in small, human moments. A raised hand, a firm voice, a refusal to look away. He smiled to himself, then turned back to his desk, opening a new case file. Outside, the day brightened, sunlight spilling across the city, still learning how to be fair. And somewhere, two sisters were sketching a new design, one that carried the word freedom hidden in its lining. Airports are strange places. They show us the best and the worst of humanity in the same breath. People rushing, hugging, arguing, waiting. Some crossing oceans for love. Others, borders for hope. But for those who live inside the quiet ache of being judged by their skin, every trip can feel like walking through invisible security checks that no one else sees. The twins never forgot that day. For months afterward, every time they packed a bag, the echo of that gate agent's voice returned. The disbelief in her tone when she questioned what they owned, where they were going, who they were allowed to be. And even though justice came swiftly, with cameras flashing and headlines spreading, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a reminder that being right doesn't erase the wound of being doubted for existing. Their story wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It was about the reflex that lives in too many hearts, the instinct to assume guilt before grace, threat before trust. The gate agent saw color before character, status before soul. And in that moment, she forgot something essential. Power doesn't come from a badge or a uniform. It comes from humanity. And once you lose that, all the authority in the world can't hide the emptiness inside you. When the officer placed handcuffs around her wrists, silence filled the terminal. Not because people wanted to see her humiliated, but because they finally saw, for once, the weight of what it feels like to be misjudged. The stare she had thrown at those girls now turned back on her. The cold eyes of assumption, now aimed in her direction. And perhaps for the first time, she understood the kind of fear she'd made them feel. The twins' father didn't celebrate her arrest. He didn't speak a single word of anger. He simply walked past her, gathered his daughters in his arms, and led them to the jet bridge. That image, the quiet dignity of walking away, said more than any courtroom could, because dignity isn't something anyone can grant or take away. It's what remains when the world tries to strip you bare and you choose to keep your soul intact. What happened that day became more than a viral story. It became a mirror held up to millions, a question whispered through screens and living rooms across the country. Why do some people still need proof of innocence before they're even allowed respect? Why is wealth only believable when it looks a certain way? And how many more moments like this must happen before we finally admit the system isn't broken? It's working exactly as it was built. But there's another truth, too. Change doesn't come from anger alone. It comes from awareness, from people refusing to stay silent when they witness injustice, from travelers, teachers, officers, and strangers who choose to see humanity first. Every time someone steps in, speaks up, or simply refuses to look away, the pattern cracks a little more. The twins would go on to tell their story not with bitterness, but with purpose. They spoke at schools, at colleges, at corporate meetings, not as victims, but as voices. And when asked why they forgave the woman who called the cops on them, one of them said something simple yet unforgettable. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to carry her fear as our burden. That's the real message here. Racism doesn't just live in shouts or slurs. It lives in glances and hesitations, in assumptions so casual we forget they hurt. It hides behind policies, dress codes, and procedures that were never neutral. But every story like this one brings a little more light to the shadows and reminds us that silence is the oxygen of prejudice. So if you've made it this far into their story, Maybe that's your sign to take part in changing the next one. Speak up when you see it. Record it. Report it. Refuse to pretend it isn't happening, because no one's humanity should ever be a matter of opinion. And if stories like this moved you, don't just scroll past them. Share them. Talk about them. Let the message reach someone who still doesn't understand. Because every view, every voice, every act of empathy is one step closer to a world where justice isn't a surprise. It's a standard. The twins walked onto that plane that day as passengers. They walked off as something more. A reminder that the smallest act of prejudice can spark the loudest demand for change. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Because awareness is resistance. And resistance, in its purest, quietest form, is love.